I'm Philip Aaron, chair of the Beverly Hills Bar Association's brand new blockchain and Web3 law section, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's program, Crypto Scams and Client Losses, What Lawyers Need to Know Now. A quick note about the section, we are newly founded, open to all level of experience, and we will meet on the first Monday of every month, starting next Monday, November 3rd at 4:30 p.m. If you are crypto curious, want to learn more about the fundamentals of blockchain or Web3, or you are already a veteran in the fast-moving space, as far as that's possible already, you're more than welcome. Bring your questions, your war stories, your ideas for future sessions, and you can also reach out via email at any time. Today's topic is urgent. Clients are being targeted through everything from pig butchering schemes and fake exchange to hacked wallets and social engineering exploits. As lawyers, we are asked to move quickly, and we are fortunate to have two outstanding speakers with deep knowledge and hands-on experience. Both work for Rome LLP. It is a boutique Los Angeles firm offering a spectrum of legal services to business facing complex legal challenges and handle client matters across industry in a wide range of disputes from complex international tech-based litigation to shareholder partnership disputes and payment processing disputes and matters involving cryptocurrency and blockchain projects. First, we have Brianna Dahlberg, partner at Rome LLP. Brianna has successfully litigated copyright, trademark, unfair competition, trade secret, antitrust, and commercial business disputes in state and federal courts across the country. Her clients range from individual creators to companies of all size in the entertainment, domain name, e-commerce, and payment processing industry. She brings the practical perspective we need when scams collide with complex platforms and IP. Second, Eugene Rome, founder and principal of Rome LLP. Eugene is an accomplished litigator and trial attorney representing clients in the US and abroad on intellectual property, payment processing, domain name disputes, business litigation, and class actions. He's been in the trenches on many of these issues we will cover today. On behalf of the BHBA, thank you for being here for our section's kickoff. With that, please join me in welcoming Eugene Rome and Brianna Dahlberg. Let's dive in.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Philip. As mentioned, Brianna and I are part of Rome LLP, and lately we've been doing a lot in the crypto space, and it had occurred to us that while there are so many capable and really accomplished litigators throughout Los Angeles and certainly in Beverly Hills, crypto is a slightly different beast, and we figured with all the outreach that we've had from clients as well as from colleagues, we thought it would make sense to provide kind of a summary or a cursory analysis of what some of the emergent issues are in crypto right now and how to navigate some of them when people reach out to the current attendees. So with that, let me share a PowerPoint and we'll go through the items that we'll be covering and we'll discuss each at length. All right, so on the agenda today, we'll cover pig butchering schemes, and before we go on to account takeover, social engineering, and legal strategies, we'll also address just investor fraud in the context of cryptocurrency scams. So first, to pig butchering schemes. Pig butchering schemes, it's a long-form financial scam that combines romance and trust building with investment fraud. And the term comes from the idea that a pig is fattened before the slaughter. How it practically works is that the fraudster will reach out through social media, dating apps, or messaging platforms, and they'll connect with someone. Usually you'll get a text message. The text message will say, hey, how are you? Or maybe it'll be something more sophisticated through Telegram, through Signal. And these people, I'm sure people have watched the news and have seen that more recently a whole network in Cambodia was shut down, but there are thousands and thousands of people using both direct intentional outreach, but also using technology to send millions, if not tens of millions, of these texts, these Facebook requests, these Instagram questions or outreaches, and some of them hit. We know that they hit because, and we'll address that a little bit later, the statistics are staggering in terms of how much money was actually lost through these pig butchering schemes. Once contact is reached, there's something called the grooming period, and we'll address it. In fact, we can do that here. Trust is built, and it starts simple. Hey, how are you? In fact, my phone gets probably 5 a day for whatever reason. How are you? How are you? Are you in LA? Are you in Boston? What are you doing? Where are you? And someone responds. We know that someone responds because of the vast amount of funds lost through this. And they talk, and for a while, it is such a studied system. It is so practiced, so sophisticated, where people really feel a connection to this person on the other end who could be either a bot or it could be just about anyone with an attractive profile pic. And of course, nothing about investments or nothing about crypto is broached initially. Hey, how are you? Oh, you're not the Peter I was looking for. Oh, well, what's your name? And this conversation just goes and goes, and it's very well crafted when you try and unpack it after the fact. When you look at it, how they slowly, piece by piece, establish a connection, establish a relationship with the target, and then, they move on to family issues. Oh, are you seeing anyone? Are you with someone? But somehow these scammers get their hooks into the target. And after things completely unrelated to investments are discussed, after all that is done, there is a little line. By the way, oh, I'm busy this weekend. I'm actually attending a crypto conference, or, I've got this complicated trade that I'm engaged in, or something like that. And at the right time, at a precisely right time, this little hook is floated, dropped into this water of victims, and some bite. And the question is, what is it? What we've seen usually is, people go, oh, I've made 200% in 1 month, 300% in 1 month. And to us, when we look at it after the fact, it looks just wild how someone, because the people that actually become the victims in the pig butchering scam they're not stupid, they're not unsophisticated. I think a lot of times they're trusting, a lot of times they are lonely, and somehow all of that leads to them simply believing what they're told. And what they're told is, oh, look, I made 200%, 300%. Typically, they're led to an online platform, basically a website, which looks like it could well be a trading platform. And you look, and it could be just like Coinbase, could be like Binance, could be like anything else. But it looks like a platform where there's a way to deposit money and you can see the trading activity. And this person, this fraudster, tells you what to do. And maybe initially there's an address, you send a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of Ethereum or something along those lines, and they tell you, oh, look here, trade there, buy this, I'll tell you when to sell. And it works like a charm. Why does it work? Well, it works because they control the platform. The platform is simply a function of engineering and software programming completed on the part of the fraudsters. It's not tied to any real markets. It's not tied to anything that actually functions with a distribution channel. Rather, all it is it's like a video game where they're the ultimate operator. And that $500 that you sent to them, suddenly is now 2,000. And you go, oh my God, I found the golden ticket, and I found it through this person that's actually very nice to me and is genuinely interested in me. And this almost euphoria kind of materializes. So what's next? You go, hey, can I invest more? Can I take the money out? And they go, of course. And sometimes they actually allow funds to be taken out where the profits are distributed through their own systems to the victims. And apologize, I see my camera flashing. And the reason they do that in the right circumstance is to generate this trust. So then when you see that the system works, that you can make 2,000, 3,000%, 400% on your investment within a matter of days or months, you go, well, can I invest more? And that's what they look for. And that's the escalation. And you're told, look, the more you invest, the more you make. There are different ways through which funds are collected. These are really sophisticated in a lot of cases. Sometimes the funds are collected when they provide an address by which to send Bitcoin. Other times it's Ethereum. Third times it could be a stable coin. But in addition to that, they'll ask for wires. And in our review of it, there are banks in Asia whose business appears to be, if not exclusively, but substantially, to receive funds originating from these scams. The same players come up time and time and time again. That conversation is a bit beyond the scope of this presentation. So once we get to level 4, this escalation, where the victim starts investing more and more and more, the perpetrators at some point see that they're tapped. And that's when the conversations turn a little bit. Now it's not, can you put more in? Now the victim's saying, look, I'd like to take some money out. There's always some kind of a stalling period. Can't do it now. The exchange is locked up. Right now, there's some kind of a conversion happening. But in the meantime, if you want to invest more, there's always some kind of a great play on the horizon. You're going to make double, you're going to make triple. When the victim finally senses that something is completely amiss, usually family steps in or someone says, listen, you've been sending money God knows where, and they ask for it back, that's where they're told, look, invest more, you'll double it, and then we'll return it all to you. When none of that works, the play that we see time and time again is this taxes issue. That's when the scammer becomes very aggressive and says, listen, if you want your money, you can have your money, but you have to pay taxes on all the money that you've made. And time again, people, I guess, feel that they're in too deep and they will borrow, however, get the funds to wire these purported taxes to the scammer. And at that point in time, 100% of the time, all communication ceases. At that point, basically, this slaughter is complete, and the money's gone. And we'll address in a minute what the remedies are, but let me navigate back to the statistics of this, and they are staggering. Chain Analysis is a company that can track the movement of crypto on the blockchain, and it has found that these criminal networks have received more than 75 billion from various victims, which in the scope of 4 or 5 years, which is a staggering amount. An additional statistics from the FBI indicates that these pig butchering losses are about 69 million in 2023 alone, in Maryland alone. And finally, just to drive the point home that these statistics are valid and real, the DOJ just recently, this was this month, announced that they seized 127,000 Bitcoin, that's $15 billion worth, from a massive crypto scam run by the Prince Holding Group and its chairman, Chen Zi, who apparently is a fugitive from justice. This is not one or two people operating this, not even 10 or 50. This is thousands of people. A lot are the victims of human trafficking. They operate from these massive centers. These are just large buildings in Southeast Asia where all the operations are these scams. The number of players are significant in this scam. Again, this is a little beyond the scope of this overview presentation, but we'll be distributing this PowerPoint to all the attendees, and you'll have a chance to review it. What do you do? A client calls and says, look, I've seen it on TV, but it looks like I'm a victim of this pig butchering scam. So there's ICE3, which is the Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's a government entity. It's basically FBI. It's an FBI-related department. The problem, and this is from colloquial conversations, the problem with them is they'll only take on a loss that's in excess of 10 million and one that happened within the last maybe 3, 4, 5 days, a week of being contacted. They are not staffed with a lot of people, and they're inundated because these scams happen all the time. There's legal action. We'll address that in a little bit. There are also crypto consulting companies. What they can do is sometimes track. The unique thing about crypto, and this may be redundant for some of the people who are deeper in the space, but everyone says it's anonymous. It is anonymous to a degree, but it's trackable because every transaction moves along the blockchain the way, I guess, payments would look on a financial ledger. So you can see where Bitcoin goes from one address to another, to another, to another. There are games that people play, such as setting it to something called a mixer. A mixer is a situation where, or it's a service, where you can send your crypto and for a fee, they'll mix it up with other people's cryptocurrency, run it through a million different transactions between wallets, and then distribute to you your funds net of the fees that they charge. There are arguments about whether or not these services are legal, illegal, or primarily illegal, but fundamentally, they make it more difficult to track. Sometimes if someone moves, and this rarely happens because the fraudsters are very sophisticated, but if they move the crypto from, say, Coinbase to their own account in Binance, the consultant companies can often get the funds frozen, and then there could be a process for getting access to them. Friendly law enforcement, human assets, platform personnel can all help in the right situation and with the right guidance. We've seen wallets be frozen. We've seen foreign law enforcement actually arrest perpetrators who were identified through KYC, know your customer, material submitted to exchanges. They were used to launder the funds through. But these are complicated paths towards recovery. Now, the next subject is an account takeover. But before we go there, I think one thing that would make sense to address is just pure investment fraud in the context of crypto. So I'll stop sharing, and I'll let Brianna address that subject.
Great. Yeah, so before we get into account takeovers and social engineering, I did want to cover a different type of crypto investment scheme that our firm has seen and we've represented victims in, that differs from the pig butchering scheme where, those are often romance scams. They're usually conducted fully online where the scammer has a fake persona. And they're not usually it's typically like a fake website. They may not actually have any coins in a blockchain. By contrast, we've seen a different type of investment scam where the scammer purports to be the developer of a new cryptocurrency or maybe an insider connected to a new cryptocurrency. They may be introduced to the victim by someone that they know. They'll befriend people in the victim's network, get an introduction. They'll meet with them in person. They're not misrepresenting their identity in the same way as the pig butchering scheme. But they'll get an audience, and then they deliver a very smooth and sophisticated investment pitch. They promote it as an investment opportunity, like it's a new startup or something. Um, they will present technical materials, white papers explaining all the new features, and typically it's some new feature, some new technical innovation that supposedly distinguishes what the scammer is offering versus existing cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. It will have uh, faster transaction time, more environmentally friendly, more secure. And they go into detail and provide very specific metrics and information about all these aspects of the new coin that they've supposedly developed. And then the pitch is that this is going to become the next Bitcoin. You have an opportunity to get into it early. It's going to take off. It's going to be used as real currency. The world's going to switch away from using Bitcoin and Ethereum and move on to whatever the new coin is. And in fact, the scammer may actually have developed something. It's surprisingly simple for anyone to create a new cryptocurrency coin. That's because Bitcoin's code is open source. Anyone can copy the code for Bitcoin, just change a few settings. It doesn't take much time. And then you have a new coin based on Bitcoin's recycled code. You give it a new name, and then you have a new coin that you can use. Of course, it doesn't have the actual technical attributes or the innovations that they've promised, but the scammers are relying on the fact that the victim is not technically sophisticated enough to vet all of the representations that are being made. It's not as if they have the ability to look at the code of what's actually developed or compare what's being done. And the presentation is so smooth. These people are so sophisticated. The victims will take their word for it. Um, there's no regulatory approval. Nobody's auditing a new crypto coin. Anybody can do it. There's even platforms that are available where the scammer doesn't even have to know how to do the actual coding themselves. It's very quick and simple to just develop something. Then once they have a new coin they've developed, there are ways that the scammer will make it look legitimate. They may get the coin listed um, on platforms, on exchanges. Um, but in fact, if they get the coin listed on exchanges out of the United States, these foreign exchanges aren't necessarily doing any vetting about what they allow to be listed on their platforms. There's certain exchanges that will just list anything that where they pay the fee. It's pay to play. They're not checking the marketing promises. They're not checking the performance claims. It's very minimal paperwork. Maybe the exchange is asking for an opinion letter from the scammer, and then we've seen lawyers will sign like a form letter saying that it's all good, um, and it's very problematic. But the exchange accepts the money, they put the coin up there, and then the scammer can show the victims like, look, this is a real coin, it's really being traded, it really exists. And the victim will go on to the exchange website, see that there's trading activity going on, but it's not a sign of legitimacy. All of the trading activity is the scammer themselves, parties related to the scammer. They're just trading the coin back and forth with themselves to make it look as if there's something going on here, when really it's all fake. Another way the scammers try to create legitimacy is through celebrity endorsements, influencer endorsements. It's the same kind of thing as getting it listed on a platform. The victim sees that these parties have endorsed it. They assume, oh, that means it must be legitimate. In fact, the celebrity or the influencer, whoever's guiding them, they're not vetting it closely. They're not looking to make sure that it has all of the claims that the scammer is saying. They're getting paid for the endorsement, in most cases. They're not necessarily looking into it too closely. And then along the same line, the scammers may have partnerships with existing uh, retailers, financial institutions, crypto ATM companies. We've even seen it where they announce that they have insurance policies. If anything happens to your investment, we're insured. Don't worry. Partnerships with wallets. Um, s- some of these partnership announcements, it may just be a blatant misrepresentation. The partnership doesn't exist. There's no actual insurance policy that's supporting uh, the victim's assets in the cryptocurrency, or the scammer might have a real relationship, but it's a paid for endorsement. Again, we've seen that they take the proceeds, and a lot of it is spent on marketing activity to create the impression that it's legitimate, that it's taking off, that something's going to happen with a new coin. We've also seen cases where they get on financial podcasts, they get on investment podcasts, promoting the new opportunity. And again, it's all a paid endorsement. The audience for these types of content, may not understand that this is not authentic. And then lastly, a lot of these scams have a Ponzi scam kind of component where they ask the victim to recruit other people. They may pay out a small return, similar to the pig butchering schemes that Eugene covered. They gain the victim's trust. You see you're making a great return on this, and so not only does the victim invest more money, but they persuade the victim to recruit more people in their own personal network, refer more people to them uh, to invest, and so then it builds and builds like a pyramid scheme from there. Um, as far as what can the victim do, once they realize it's a scam, and they're not getting their money back. um it's similar remedies to uh pig butchering. You can take legal action there. There's fraud claims, conversion. We've pursued claims for a violation of California's Penal Code 496 for civil theft. But there's also potential securities fraud violations, or causes of action for selling unregistered securities. Whether a cryptocurrency qualifies as a security under the securities laws it's a really complicated question. It's kind of outside of the scope of this program. Um, and it's really dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But in the cases that we've seen where something is being promoted as an investment, um, it's clearly qualifies as a security under the Howey test, under the relevant securities laws. And again, as Eugene mentioned before, there are crypto experts who specialize in uh, tracing where the assets went. Like if the victim was investing in the opportunity by sending the scammer cryptocurrency, there are people that can track where did that money go, um, uh, use that to track them down. This is also an area where, sometimes law enforcement uh, is willing to pursue these cases. There have been some very high profile ones that the Department of Justice has gone into. It depends on the size of the loss and the number of victims again. And with that, I will turn it back over to Eugene.
Thank you. So yeah, thanks for addressing that. There are basically, these are just conventional frauds. The same people that will sell you stock in a company that will go nowhere now see a more exotic opportunity in crypto because everyone's watching TV and maybe in stocks. Some people have made some money, but that's an old version of rags to riches or immediate kind of gratification, immediate riches story. But with crypto, you see them. You see the 20-year-old billionaires. And if not them, why not you? And the opportunity is right there. Like Brianna said, these people say all the right things. The crypto is faster. This new coin is faster. This coin is insured. This coin is bound to be adaptable. Bitcoin's expensive to transact in, but not this new coin that we've created. Bitcoin takes a lot of energy to transact in or to mine, but not this one. The white papers are long, they're complex, and most importantly, they're completely unvetted. You can put just about anything into a paper and presented to people as truth. And we've seen that time and time again. Statements being made that absolutely have no connection to reality. And any expert who looks at it says, look, this is just a fraud on its face. Of course, the people who market in these types of coins, they do not pitch the experts. They pitch people who have made some easy money and are ready to kind of make another killing on a new investment, which often fails. The former head of the SEC, Gary Gensler, has said that this industry is awash with scams and fraud, and he was not wrong. Having said that, we'll move on to the next subject in this space, which is the account takeovers. Account takeovers are situations where the fraudsters somehow get access to a person's, whether it's a Coinbase account, it could be their Binance account, crypto.com, or it could actually be their wallet. In other words, they gain access to anywhere, any repository where cryptocurrency is being held. How do they do it? Credential theft, they hack into a computer, find maybe they use the same passwords across a number of different accounts, whether it's email or their calendar software or even Facebook. There's a whole gray market or black market, if you will, on the dark web where you can buy millions and millions of people's account credentials. And through that, these people are tenacious, sophisticated. They have a lot of technology at their disposal and a lot of skill. And they just penetrate and penetrate and penetrate until they find whether they are the passwords or the key phrases or whatever it is that they need to log into someone's actual account and cash out the funds. This is a particularly attractive industry for this kind of activity because speaking of traditional accounts with assets, for example, if someone manages to hack into a Wells Fargo account belonging to a person, well, you still have to move the funds out. Typically, there's not a direct way of wiring it. And even if there is, you have to wire it or send it to another account, which means that someone else had to have come into a bank, shown their ID, set up the account. There's a paper trail. That's the KYC part of it. But with crypto wallets and foreign exchanges and mixers, there's no such requirements. Someone can literally buy a crypto wallet online, a Trezor or a Ledger, and use that address as the address that collects the funds. That said, if reports are made, some of these addresses will remain in the FBI and DOJ and other entities' files. So certain addresses are marked, but that doesn't mean that you cannot pull funds out of them. So if the transaction happens abroad or it happens between two criminal actors, which happens all the time, then yes, the funds will remain tainted, but they can be used. And so crypto is a very attractive area in which this is done. SIM swapping is an interesting one. That's where people have basically this happened to a early tech investor, I think his name is Gary Kremen. Someone managed to gain access to his phone, the SIM card credentials, and managed to direct the transfer. At the time, it was about $20 million worth of cryptocurrency. I think right now it'd probably be in the hundreds of millions. He was able to recover a substantial part of it because the person who did it was a 20-year-old New York citizen, but usually it's more professional, not amateurish players that are abroad, and the crypto gets scattered all over the place. Companies like Chain Analytics and others will map out where funds have gone, but just because they can map it doesn't mean that they can always be recovered. So the typical, one second. The typical structure of one of these account takeovers is there's reconnaissance and credential threat. Apologize. Let me read this. There we go. So here's a typical structure of this. Someone does steal the credit login credentials. They get into an account, they take over it. Sometimes they change the passwords right away, they change the contact information right away. There's other techniques that makes it more difficult for the account holder and the platform administrator to take any kind of remedial action. And then they liquidate the funds in the account, usually the crypto, by sending it somewhere else. And the final step is the laundering one. Laundering is where they send it through mixers, they send it to willing brokers somewhere else who will trade it for a lesser amount in a different crypto. But ultimately, the funds are gone. Just to demonstrate or discuss how sophisticated some of these systems are for the account control and evasion portion, what we've seen is situations where someone will actually change the two-factor authorization settings, will modify the recovery email, but it's gone as far as, in the case of one of our clients, they actually managed to squeeze in a software update into his computer. So right as they had him provide the key code to effectuate the transfer, and right when he realized what was happening, his computer started updating, and he watched in horror for the next 7.5 minutes while the computer was resetting. And once it was reset, he was back in his account, which had gone from 890,000 to about $5 in assets. And unfortunately, we see different variations of this exact thing time and time again, and the techniques used are very sophisticated and they're ever changing. So it appears that there's literally thousands of people dedicated to the singular objective of figuring out how to take over someone's account. That's why it's critical that people protect both their devices, their passwords, and I'll get into the social engineering aspects of crypto fraud in a second, but that's part and parcel of it, where through social engineering, a fraudster will gain a certain part of information necessary to access a protected device or a protected account, and then will implement the takeover. And literally, one morning you look, you have all of these coins in your account, and the very next one they're gone. We've seen people penetrate cold storage, which is just crypto wallets that are not connected to the internet, so you can't log into it, but you can reset them. And that also might be a discussion for a different panel, but you can reset wallets, cold wallets, and basically your wallet that you reset with the credentials for the hacked one becomes the new wallet with all of the assets in it. So the question that we're always asked when we're called is, what can you do? So let's assume that the account takeover happened on Coinbase. Well, obviously, maybe not obvious. There are two tracks. One is the legal track, the other one is the expert-driven effort to recover the coins themselves. Focusing on the legal tracked for the time being. There's a claim for a breach of contract, breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, one for negligence, conversion because cryptocurrency is it's personal property. And also assert claims for false advertising and misrepresentation of security measures, which happens all the time because all these platforms tell you that they're so secure, and they have all of these sophisticated techniques that they implement, which I would say 99% of the people reading those statements don't understand, but it does generate some trust. And these platforms are, generally speaking, pretty secure, but they always have an Achilles heel. And we'll address that a little bit later. But even Coinbase had one, and it was a big deal, and it happened literally this year. So these are the more kind of pedestrian claims that can be brought. Of course, there are very restrictive terms of services. There are arbitration agreements, mandatory arbitration, prohibitions and class actions, and limitation of damages. And so you also have to contend with the fact that the hack is a criminal act by a third party. Presumably, there's some immunity there. Ultimately, these platforms have a lot of money and are not that willing to part with it, and so they will defend the cases. Another set of claims that can be brought is the violation of the EFTA, that's Electronic Funds Transfer Act, Reg E. There's some complex theories that were actually recently validated by a federal court in New York under the EFTA, where claims can be brought against these platforms, so long as the statutory framework is followed and you notify them of the transfer. They have an obligation under the law to take remedial action potentially. If someone is older, elder abuse claims can be brought, and it's an unusual situation where such claims are brought, but by statute, the people would fit within it. Consumer protection or unfair business practices is another claim. CLRA is an interesting one because under a recent case, a California case, the California Supreme Court, or I apologize, the Court of Appeals, has stated that the CLRA's injunctive relief provisions are not subject to arbitration and therefore allow the class action to proceed, where solely injunctive relief was sought. And there are strategic considerations there as well. Obviously, if you're just representing one victim, you may want to arbitrate or litigate the case directly, but CLRA should not be overlooked because it does provide a different path that's immune, at least in part, to the mandatory arbitration provisions and class action waivers in those agreements. And that's point 8b. And we can discuss some of these remedies a little bit more during the Q&A portion of this presentation. Social engineering. So social engineering is the use of deception, impersonation, or psychological pressure to manipulate someone into performing actions that compromise their credentials or wallets or their assets. How's it done? Phishing, again, you get text messages, you'll get SMS phishing, spear phishing. I do not want to cover all of these because each one merits its own discussion. But a typical situation is if someone calls you by your name, calls you on the phone, speaks in a very elegant accent, and tells you, listen, and it's usually sophisticated. They're not going to call right away and say, hey, we're calling from Coinbase, what's your password? Obviously, that doesn't work. Everyone's red flags go up and they hang up. What do they do instead? They will call and say, hey, in my case, Eugene, we're calling from Coinbase. We're looking at your account. By the way, they've managed to do it so that the phone number they're calling from, if you Google Coinbase phone, Google somehow shows the same exact number. Not sure how that was done, whether it was done at the Google level or whether they're using some kind of masking software on the phones, but you look it up and same 800 number. You go, okay. And they say, look, we know that in your account, you've got 58 Bitcoin, maybe some Ethereum and some stable coins. We're seeing a lot of weird activity, and so just be careful. You go, hey, no harm, no foul. They haven't asked me for anything. Sounds good. I'll make sure to be careful. Then you get another call a little bit later. We're still seeing all this activity. Please change your password. You go again. Okay. You're not asking for anything. Not a problem. Change your password. Some time goes by. You think it's all done. They call and they say, look, someone's trying to transfer funds from your Coinbase account. We can't stop it. You go, what do I do? At this point in time, you're trusting them. They knew everything about you. They knew your date of birth. They knew your address. They knew exactly how much crypto you had in your account. So at this point, you do believe that it's Coinbase calling, and they say, look, here's what you got to do. Move it to this wallet that we've set up. They'll send you a link, and then it'll be safe from this hack that's happening in your account. And so many people, even people who are very sophisticated, people that we do represent, who ordinarily are cautious and intelligent and insightful, somehow they succumb to these techniques that are just incredibly, incredibly powerful. And they will move the funds. And much like in the other scams, the funds are gone within a matter of seconds, and you can actually go online and you see it dripping out of your account. It happens in all kinds of ways: airdrops, impersonation of platforms, these SIM swapping attacks, fake investment or recovery scams. We've had our own experts complain to us that the reason they have such bad reviews online is not because they've done anything, but because someone else has pretended to be that very expert company, has onboarded clients who are probably the victims of their own fraud and scams, charged them an upfront fee, and then disappeared. And so the people are, we've seen people have reached out and said, look, there's a company out there, and we work with them. They're actually an upstanding company. And we ask them to send us copies of their correspondence or engagement letters with them. And we've sent copies to the company, and the company says, look, these aren't our engagement letters. This is yet another scam. So basically, these scams go into multiple innings, if you will, until they manage to bleed someone completely dry. I alluded to the fact that some of these techniques are very sophisticated. Well, this one is probably the most sophisticated of them. Basically, these hackers managed to purchase a substantial set of customer information from Coinbase contractors operating in India. So in May of 2025, Coinbase actually announced that this happened. The CEO, Brian Armstrong, came out and said that rather than pay the ransom of 20 million the hackers demanded, he was going to instead offer the $20 million reward for information leading to the attacker's arrest. I don't know if anyone collected that 20 million, but what I do know is that a whole lot of people lost a lot more than $20 million that was being sought. And what I also know is that Coinbase is not exactly rushing to refund the money, even though this is clearly their fault. The current position appears to be the lack of causation, or Coinbase's assertion that the plaintiffs cannot demonstrate causation between this leak and the theft. But when someone calls you and has all of your information, your date of birth, your account balances, the street that you live on, your mother's maiden name, that certainly generates the requisite trust. And coupled with the other techniques that the scammers use, these Coinbase users did provide information that led to their accounts being drained. And so the causal connection is there, but evidently not in the eyes of Coinbase. Here's the anatomy of a social engineering attack. The difference between the social engineering attacks and account takeovers is that the attack hinges on user deception, not a system breach. So in a social engineering scam, it's the user that ultimately provides the keys to their account, as opposed to someone jumping onto the platform without their knowledge and transferring out their resources. Recovery is rare, and legal claims are not as powerful because other than in the Coinbase example here, usually platforms say, look, someone got into your account, someone accessed, you gave the person the keys to your account, you can't really fault us for it. Still, you can track where the funds went. You can potentially bring legal claims for certain acts of negligence stemming from inadequate security mechanisms, but they are a lot more difficult. And with that, we would like to turn it over to question and answer portion of this discussion.
Eugene, I've got the Q&A open.
I see it.
You see it?
Yeah.
So one of the questions is, what responsibility do financial institutions have with large unexpected transfers out of the person's account, particularly seniors?
So I think we touched on that very question earlier. It largely depends. So why were the funds transferred out? That's the question. How are they transferred out? Was it social engineering? In which case, maybe someone called a senior, told them, hey, I'd like to access your account. And for whatever reason, they provided the information. I think in that case, the platform would have somewhat limited exposure because ultimately, while there really is fraud, the fraud in that case would not be the result of the platform's emission. That said, a lot of the platforms are running all kinds of AI analytics. And so the effect of that is they can always detect unusual activity. Sometimes when they're aware that there's been a spike in a particular type of fraud, they will block certain substantial transfers before the transfers occur until they're validated. And we've seen that in the case of a client where over 10 million was transferred out, even though the platform itself has said, look, we're not going to hit send on this. But ultimately, the liability is small in the event of social engineering. Now, if the account was taken over and it was done through a flaw on the platform, I think the claims are substantial. I think there's a claim for negligence. I think there's a claim for breach of contract, breach of covenant of good faith and fair dealing. There is an elder abuse claim that's technically available, although I've not seen it litigated through the appellate level, but based on the statutory prescriptions, it's there. And that is a better claim. That said, much like a bank account being drained by someone to whom you give a debit card and your PIN, the responsibility is often perhaps minimal, sometimes not even realistic. So let's see, what else we have? We have a question from Kate Brown. Do you want to address it? How do we protect consumers when the current administration is pro-crypto and Bitcoin and have pardoned offenders? I think that's more of a policy question. And
yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, it's hard to know the environment. Also, we're aware of all these pending investigations and enforcement actions that have been going on, and now it's kind of hard to know, like, what's the status. Have the priorities and enforcement changed with the administration? So yeah, I mean, I'd say it's challenging. I mean, I'm not sure how we how we address that.
there's another one. In terms of our record of recovering assets, that's a really tricky question. I don't think there could be ever a record. Each case is different. Each case is different. The players are different. The parties are different. It's a very, very difficult question to answer. Sometimes if you act quickly, depending on the organization, maybe you can get a wallet frozen, and then you start talking to the operator. For example, where there's a like Circle.io, where there is an actual entity behind it, as opposed to a fully decentralized situation like Bitcoin. So that's a complex question. There's also a question about specific points of contact within the DOJ for crypto fraud. As I mentioned, there's ICE3, but they are completely overwhelmed. So an FBI report can be made, and we've made them in the case of a client that lost $14 million to one of these romance scams, pig butchering scams. And maybe, Brianna, you can address that, and also the next question about whether or not there are international organizations that help coordinate investigations.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if there's one international organization that coordinates um, assisting victims. I will say that, you know, in the case of the client who lost the $14 million to the big butchering scam, you know, it involved a number of different jurisdictions. You know, we had to trace where the money went. It went to certain bank accounts in Hong Kong. You know, certain actors were in Singapore. There's a lot of different coordination. We ended up making reports to the authorities in a number of different countries. Ultimately, the Hong Kong police force was able to track the accounts that we provided and freeze those accounts, and so they are pursuing it. Um, you know, it you know it's remains to be seen. You know, will they put the perpetrators in jail? You know, can they track down like where they're actually located? But we were able to trace the money and get it frozen successfully, working through the authorities in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, so authorities sometimes can help, but they only will get involved in a really substantial amount. I think there are really open questions as to the liability of the foreign banks that either willingly or willfully blindly assist these scammers, because we see the same players over and over again, and it's never a single transfer. So what these fraudsters will do is they'll set up 30 different companies. They're all shell companies, all have the same address, and you know, KYC has to be really thin on them. But each company will receive a wire for 120 grand, 150 grand. The wires themselves, they've gotten crafty because local banks are not going to authorize, without further conversation, a wire that says investment in crypto that's going from, you know, a California resident's account to a Hong Kong bank. They'll probably call the person, have a conversation with them. So instead, they're telling the victims to say, hey, it's for farming equipment or for, you know, plastics or something like that, which is unfortunate. These people trusting in these romancers will do so, but their problem then is, in my view, that it's very difficult for them to go back to their own bank and say, why did you authorize me to send this wire? We think you were asleep at the wheel, you were negligent. The bank can come back and say, well, you're the one that committed bank fraud by identifying the reason for the wire transfer that wasn't actually what it was. So I think these victims are being squeezed from both sides. They're sending money kind of into a space where it's virtually impossible to get it back. But at the same time, I think they will have limited remedies domestically with their own banks, with their own institutions, because they were led to initiate the transfers in a way that makes them almost not deliberately complicit in the fraud, but complicit in this effort to mask the reason for the transfers out. And I think it ends up biting them after the fact, when they start looking for ways to be made whole. Ultimately, it's a very tricky path, and sometimes requires, in the cases that we handle, both the legal aspect of it, but also the tracing and the freezing. And we have colleagues who can literally serve search warrants in Ukraine, in Dubai, in other European countries on people who come up in the KYC I think we're right at the absolute end of our presentation. I don't know if someone from BHBA wants to jump on and tell us what to do next.
All right. And well, this concludes today's presentation. Thank you so much, Eugene and Brianna, for your time today. And thank you so much to our members for joining us. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.